Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you to Barzan for the reading, and thank you for the welcome. It's great to be here. I think this is my third time coming to St. George's on a Sunday morning, and I've been to Holy Trinity Ball Lane about the same number of times. Whether I'm invited again or not, it's still good to be invited back. And I'm from, as Lizzie has said, the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity, LICC. Don't be put off by the London bit. We're for the whole of the UK, and just for the record, I'll be rooting for Leeds rather than the London team this afternoon in the FA Cup semi-final. But we are all about equipping people to be disciples in the whole of their lives, in their Monday to Saturday lives, wherever you find yourself, and what that looks like in workplaces and leisure places, in all sorts of places that you might be in this coming week and throughout the year. Now, when we say that, it could be that you get the impression we're so for your places out there that we're not for in here. And nothing could be further from the truth. We're for both. We're for the interplay between the two. I used to pastor a church very like this church, a larger church on the south coast. And I would say to you, one win-win for you would be to pray for and support your clergy team and your wider staff team. If you do nothing else from this message, do that, because they will be blessed and you will be blessed. It's increasingly complicated to pastor and lead larger churches, and particularly at a time when you're church planting. So if you do that, they will be blessed and you will be blessed. So for today's reading, it was read to us by Barzan. We'll just see it again on the screen briefly. It's the passage that talks about salt and light from Matthew 5, verses 13 to 16. And I want to draw out from that this idea of what it looks like, therefore, for you to be and for me to be a follower of Jesus in our everyday lives. One of the prayers, if you picked up on it, was that we might be fruitful in our everyday lives. So one way to picture it would be with the images that are going to now appear on the screen. Imagine Jesus living your life. How would he debate policy if that was what he was doing? How would he play football if that was what he was doing? How would Jesus deliver a pizza if that was what Jesus was doing? How would he post on Insta if that's what Jesus was doing? Because you will do some of those things and others. How would Jesus create a spreadsheet? You know, we know that our Lord, we might say a carpenter, but actually a general builder might be a better description. So what sort of a builder would he have been? Surely reliable and on time and charging a fair price and all of those things. So that already gives us a clue as to what it might look like for you and me in our everyday lives. Thank you. So yes, how would Jesus deliver a pizza is a good question that you might not have thought of before arriving this morning, dare I say. And if you do, then you win all smug points and you can come forward and tell me afterwards. As an institute, LICC, we've looked at this with a number of people. We've come up with it's not the only formula, but a way of looking at this, which we call the 6 M's of fruitfulness, which is why I was so glad that somebody prayed about that we would be fruitful in everyday life. I don't know if you did that for me or just did it anyway, but I'm grateful that you did it. Now, we analysed what people were saying they were doing in everyday life, and partly because they thought they weren't being faithful disciples, because they weren't telling people about Jesus every day in their workplaces, say. And actually we found that they were being fruitful in a whole range of ways, including that way. They were, and they all begin with M, you see. They were modelling godly character. They were making good work. They were ministering grace and love. They were moulding culture. They were mouthpieces for truth and justice. And they were messengers of the gospel when the opportunity came. All of those things, not just one of them. If you want more information about that, there's a whole course to go with it. And there are readings you can pick up. We've got a table with some resources, and you can sign up for our mailing afterwards. But for today, I want to pick just one of them that particularly fits the salt and light idea. I've ringed it there for you, the moulding culture one. And I've picked that one because in some ways that might be considered the hardest of them. Now, some of you might think being a messenger of the gospel is the hardest, and we can have that debate, and I totally get if you think that. But moulding culture, you see, it implies more than you doing something. It implies the atmosphere around you changes as well. We might well sing, "Build your kingdom here, change the atmosphere," and I love that song as well if you sing it, but we mean more than the atmosphere here, don't we? We mean the atmosphere at the school gate, the atmosphere on the football field, the atmosphere in the workplace, the atmosphere in the hotel you're staying in, the atmosphere in the queue in Tesco's. How do we begin to do that? We would hope when we model godly character and make good work and minister grace and love and a mouthpiece for truth and justice and messengers of the gospel that has an impact on other people. But moulding culture requires that somehow our presence helps change others too. That's what salt and light is about, actually. I haven't moulded the culture of anything if I've only changed myself. And the idea of salt and light is that we all change and we impact the environment around us in that way. So, what do we mean by culture and moulding culture? Well, culture has sometimes been defined as the way things are done around here in our different places. And somehow we want those things to be done in a more Christ-like way because of our presence, because that we're there. And some of you might already be thinking, well, that's more than I can do. That's an M too far. I can have a go at the others, but to affect the people around me, how do I do that? And of course, we can't do that without the Holy Spirit in us and God using us to affect others. But I want to show you in this passage, in this famous passage of Salt and Light, that this is totally possible for all of us in this room who follow Jesus, who are doing our stumbling best to follow Jesus. And it's needed. That not only is it totally possible, that it's already happening. You know each other better than I know any of you. But you may already know from conversations you've had with people you're sitting with, or somewhere else in the room, or are listening online, that they're already having that effect in the places they find themselves every day. And more than that, this idea of moulding culture positively, it goes to the very heart of who you are called to be in your everyday life. I asked you to pray for the clergy and those who are here, but we're all called to be priests, to be ministers in our everyday life. This goes to the very heart of what that looks like. To be salt and light means that we're called to be different, not different like a football team wearing a different colour shirt to the other team so that they can see that we're not them, but salt and light in the sense of a difference, in the sense of an appealing difference, that others want to have that difference. So when we see Jesus reading, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl." We should note that this is a challenge from Jesus for all of us, for our everyday lives, for every way we find ourselves. And so, as it says there in the screen, when Jesus picks this illustration, he's picking everyday illustrations, something that people would absolutely get. More than that, he's picking vital illustrations. To describe you as salt and light in Jesus' time is to pick two things that are absolutely vital for survival. We might not think of salt that way, but salt was used not just to add flavour, as we use it, which it certainly was, but also pre-refrigeration as a way of storing meat so that it didn't go rotten and didn't kill you when you ate it. So it's a vital illustration. And also, I'd want us to notice that both of them are hugely powerful illustrations from a very small amount having a massive effect. So if you feel you're a small influence in your everyday context, notice the power of those illustrations. So yes, everyday illustrations. When Jesus says you are the light of the world, he could have picked a religious idea of light. He could have picked a menorah, a candle with lots and lots of lights used in synagogues and in the temple. But no, he's describing a little lamp and saying you're like that and I'm like that. And when he says that you are salt, I know that's an unusual illustration for our culture. Almost a negative illustration. If I was to say I met someone and they were a bit salty, that's not necessarily the most complimentary comment in British culture. But when Jesus says that, he couldn't say anything more endorsing and empowering for the people listening to him. The Romans associated salt with purity. The Greeks associated it with being divine. And the Jews associated it with wisdom. And when he says, you're the light of the world, I'm not sure he could pick anything more endorsing to describe you and me, because it's one of his descriptions of himself. In John's Gospel, he says, I am the light of the world. And here he says, you are the light of the world. And then we're to do both things without losing the strength of them, without losing our saltiness, or without having a light and hiding it somewhere under a bushel, for example, or under a bucket, if that's an easier way of describing it. Now, some of you here may have a problem with that at this point. Namely, you're of a scientific mind, for example, and you're thinking, well, actually, salt can't lose its saltiness. And some of you weren't thinking that, and now you are thinking that, and now you're worried. So let's just analyse that for a moment. My wife studied chemistry here in Leeds, and she has a PhD in chemistry, and this is one of the things that she's thought about over the years. In one way, salt can't be unsalty. Sodium chloride is sodium chloride, it is salt. But in Jesus' day, the methods for extracting salt from the seabed and from the sea were not as effective as ours. So when they got what looked like salt, it wasn't 100% salt. It looked like 100% salt. It was mostly salt, and it could be used as salt. But the more that you used it, salt it was the thing that would evaporate the quickest and dissolve the quickest. So you would use it a bit, and you would have almost entirely salt, and it would be useful. Then you would use it a bit more, and you would have mostly salt, still looked entirely like salt, but still not quite as useful. And then you would use it again, and it looked like salt, but almost all the salt had gone. And it had lost its saltiness. That's what Jesus is referring to. And so the challenge for you and me is it's really easy to somehow, in our everyday context, rather than mold the culture, be molded by the culture and be watered down and less effective than we previously were. The organisation that I'm part of was formed by a guy called John Stott, who was a leading Christian thinker in the last century. And he's helpfully explained what being salt looks like. If we can go to the John Stott quote. He has said this: Christian salt has no business remaining snugly in elegant little ecclesiastical, that's churchy, salt cellars. Our place is to be rubbed into the secular community as salt is rubbed into meat to stop it going bad. When society does go bad, we Christians tend to throw our hands up in pious horror and reproach the non-Christian world. But should we not rather reproach ourselves? One can hardly blame unsalted meat for going bad. It cannot do anything else. The real question to ask is, where is the salt? Friends, you and I are called to be salt tomorrow, wherever we find ourselves. And when I was thinking about light, I was reading, again, a very old commentary written more than 60 years ago by a guy called William Barclay. And what he says, it could be written today, other than there's one or two phrases that are kind of maybe a little bit twee, like the motor car. We wouldn't say motor car today. And some of the industry is maybe less prevalent than it used to be. But I love this, particularly because I'm a golfer. I love this quote. A Christianity whose effect stops at the church door is not much use to anyone. It should be more visible in the ordinary activities in the world, of the world. Our Christianity should be visible in the way we treat a shop assistant across the counter, in the way we order a meal in a restaurant, in the way we treat our employees or serve our employer, in the way we play a game or drive or park a motor car, in the daily language we use, in the daily literature we read. A Christian should be just as much a Christian in the factory, the workshop, the shipyard, the mine, the schoolroom, the surgery, the kitchen, the golf course, the playing field, as in church. Jesus did not say, "You are the light of the church." He said, "You are the light of the world." I love that that was written 60 years ago. And yet, other than maybe shipyard and mine, which we have a few less of today, it could all apply to all of us today. And so they are essential illustrations that Jesus is bringing us here. We can think of salt as like, would you like a bit of salt with that? But no, these are absolutely essential illustrations. And they are powerful illustrations, as I have said, in their effectiveness. A small thing having such a powerful, massive effect on all of us. These illustrations are for us if we think we can't do this. Because with God's strength, we can. And that's how the world will be changed, Leeds will be changed, and the world will be changed for God's kingdom if we are salt and light in those kind of ways. I want to do just two things to close, and then I'll hand to Lizzie. And what we'd love to do is to pray for as many of you who would want to stand up and say, yeah, I'm up for this, to kind of commission you to your everyday context. I want to give you a couple of examples, and then I want to give you a gift. So hang on for the gift, although I may have oversold the gift. So we'll just hang on there for a second. Simple illustration. A person I know was very high up in the computer industry, and he moved to a new place of work. And in that place of work, they had a culture that everybody stayed late whether they had work to do or not, because everybody stayed late and it looked bad if you didn't. So much so that people took 2 coats to work. They took their real coat and they took a coat that they left at their desk that looked like they had stayed there if they left early. That was the culture of the workplace. When my friend went there, he decided with another senior person that that was not okay. And so they decided they were going to leave early at 5 o'clock, but not before going around to everybody and saying, "We're going now. Thank you for your work." And over time, people stopped taking 2 coats. They molded the culture. And I would say actually they worked more effectively, not less effectively. People would stay if they had to, but not because they felt like they had to. Now you could say that's okay because they're a senior person, they've got that influence. So let me go to somebody who was one of the most junior people in a school. She was a newly qualified teacher. Her church prayed for her as she started this, as we would like to pray for all of you, and commission you with whatever you do, paid or unpaid. And she was in a primary school, and after about 6 months, they said to her, "So how's it going in this school?" And she said, "It's going terribly. The kids are lovely, but the staff room is toxic. And it's all to do with the milk." And they said, "It's all to do with the milk? How can it be to do with the milk?" And she said, "Yeah, everybody brings their own milk, and they take a Sharpie pen, and they write their name on the milk, and then they put it in the fridge, and then everybody steals everybody else's milk. And then everybody hates everybody else as a result." So they prayed for her again. Some of you will be able to write your own script as to what she did. She decided, I'm going to get there early. I'm going to buy a 4 pint of milk. I'm going to write "for everyone" on the bottle. and put it in the fridge. And that totally transformed the working atmosphere in that school, I have to tell you. So my question to you is, what can you do that represents Jesus well, that helps mold the culture to be salt and light in the places you find yourself? And lastly, the gift that we're going to give you all, I said I may have oversold it, and the stewards are going to help me with this, is we've got for you all, if this is too small to see from here, then you get the idea. It's a sachet of salt for you. So what would I like you to do with that salt? Well, firstly, I'd like you to adhere to any medical advice you have about salt intake and not go against that. But I would like you to use it as a prayer prompt. So perhaps today when you have something to eat, you could add a bit of salt to it and notice the difference that that makes. And recognize that you're called to make that positive difference. Or maybe at some point tomorrow, in your everyday place, wherever you find yourself, you could put a bit of salt on your tongue when other people aren't watching and think you're weird, and turn that into a prayer that you are called to be salt and light and to make a salt and light difference. Friends, we'd love to pray for you, and it's much more appropriate that Lizzie leads that than me, so I'm going to invite Lizzie to come and join me now.